Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff, Mosher, Adam, Caplan, as we are in the middle of week 2 of Philadelphia Eagles training camp. Since our last podcast, I've been at an Eagles training camp practice. There's been the first padded practice, which happened on Tuesday. So we've had developments there. Adam is still out on the West Coast doing his training camp tour. Who have you seen in the last 2 or 3 days?
All right, so I was with the Chargers for 2 days, Rams for one,
right,
and Niners, and then I'll be later this week. I'll be visiting the Eagles again. Actually, one or two times more before next week. Looking forward to seeing them and talking to people who've been in practice. Apparently Tuesday was pretty interesting. We've got some interesting notes.
Yep.
It's always about kind of big picture. We're not giving play-by-play here. That's for other people to do, which is fine. We like that too, but yeah, we want to give you kind of what has happened since it started and how it ended Tuesday, which is good, by the way. Some good stuff there.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple new minor injuries and one guy returned, which is good. We'll get to that.
Right.
And it's certainly been an interesting week and a half.
It has been. We'll get into a lot of the injuries, the developments, everything that's going on with the Eagles. Fascinating week for you. I mean, to be able to get to see the defending Super Bowl champs, you get to see a team that a lot of people are predicting to be this year's Super Bowl champs in the Chargers. I know there's a lot of hype around them, and deservedly so, from their talent and their offseason. You've seen the NFC runners up with the San Francisco 49ers, and then, you come home and check out the Eagles, who made the playoffs too. So exciting week for you there, Adam. And,
That's true. That's true. Now I come to think about it, I had not thought of it that way. Yeah, it's like, I remember I've been to some, obviously not every team's going to be good. I was at the Giants. That was the first camp I hit. And they're completely revamped on offense and defense. If you're a Giants fan watching this, you're not going to recognize the schemes on offense and defense, but a lot of the other stuff and a lot of the coaches have remained with these other staffs.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we'll wind up doing for our listeners a special ITB TV with just you kind of going through your training camp tour. We've done that the last 2 years, and what you've learned about other teams along the way, which is always, I think, one of our favorite ITBs to do around this time, because we kind of had to branch out a little bit.
You know what? The last camp I'll be at, really cool. It's the Dolphins hosting the Eagles at the end of the month.
Nice. That's right. Yeah. Now I'm trying to work on getting there with you so that we can do
that'd be great. Yeah,
be great. See if we can make that happen.
That'd be awesome. It'll be hot as hell, probably in the hundreds. But anyway.
Probably, but you know what? That's not going to be too different than what it is here in the Northeast, because it's been brutally hot. So let's remind everybody. Look, InsideTheBirds.com. Myself, Adam, and Andrew DeCecco. We've had constant stories coming out of training camp, so make sure you're following InsideTheBirds.com. Make sure you're checking out our newsletter. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. You can still do that at InsideTheBirds.com. And if you get a chance, we had a few reviews in the past week, 5-star reviews. We really appreciate that on the Apple platform. If you can continue to do that, ask us a question, we'll wind up answering it if you give us a 5-star review. So we appreciate all the great work and feedback as far as what goes into that. And so let's start off with kind of an injury. I feel like we're Andy Reid with this, but we always start off with injuries, but it's really important.
What was his
injuries?
All right, injuries, right?
No, I think the most famous one, though, is like after the Super Bowl loss, when he started off his press conference, injuries, and then he wanted, like nobody.
Did he really?
After you lose the Super Bowl, no one's really going to ask you about who's injured. You got 6 or 7 months to recover.
I don't remember that. Wow, that's really funny.
The second best one, and I don't mean to make light of a very serious situation, but it was sort of humorous at the time, was the first press conference Andy held after Jerome McDougal had been shot at I think it was a convenience store down in Florida right before training camp, which was a terrible situation. But Andy literally led off the press conference with injuries. All right, Jerome McDougal got shot, which is not something you hear every single day when a coach goes through an injury list. Yeah.
Crazy. I would love to. Were you there that day? Was it 03, 04?
It was before my time, but I was in the area and I remember watching it either on TV.
I would love to watch that. Yeah, I would love to watch that. I'd love to see just how he just delivers it. It's amazing, man. No, give him credit. And the other thing, we've mentioned this before, kudos to the Eagles. Most teams don't do this. They give an injury update. It's good for the fans just to know who's hurt. And we'll go through these very quickly. So Zach Pascal, he's still not practicing yet, but apparently he's feeling better. Come back from the food poisoning, man.
No, he's out there. He's not in practicing, but he's standing with the coaches. So I know it put him in the hospital, and he was probably in a really bad way for a night, but it's not like he's not there. He's standing, he's doing all right.
The problem with food poisoning, depending how bad it is, you could lose a lot of weight by throwing up a lot. So you got to keep your dehydrated.
Right.
Yeah. So that's something to keep an eye on. Greg Ward's new. He has a toe injury, so he didn't work on Tuesday. We'll see what happens on Thursday. Grant Calcaterra with what we're told is a left hamstring injury.
Yep.
We've got a ballpark of like 2 to 3 weeks is the area.
Right.
And with hamstrings, as you were saying in the other show, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it could be longer with these hamstring strains. And it was he grabbed it. So the way hamstrings go is the higher up it is on the leg, the worse it is.
Right.
The lower it is, the better chance you have to come back sooner. And then Mac McCain is new. He didn't work on Tuesday. He's competing for the 5th cornerback job. Then remaining on PUP, active PUP, Tyree Jackson, of course, Brett Toth, Richard Rodgers. And remember, they're still down 3 tight ends. They haven't signed anyone yet. And then here's the good news. And this was a small surprise because Sirianni was so vague on it.
Agreed.
Milton Williams is back after just missing 1 practice. That's great.
Good sign. Really good sign. I agree with you. With the way Sirianni kind of did not give anything close to a timetable and was so vague with it, you thought it might be a couple of weeks. In fact, Sirianni did specify that he was still pretty sore the day or two after he suffered the injury. So it did make you think it was going to be a while. So it was good to see him back at practice.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's definitely good. That was good. So they've been lucky, knock on wood. It's funny. I was talking to the Chargers. When you ask a coach or executive particularly executives about how's the camp going, the first thing they say is we're healthy, and then you go like that, knock on wood, because that's what you want. And the Chargers for years, though lately they've been much better with injury, but for years they had such a bad injury situation. But that's what the number one thing is, to come out of healthy at training camp.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of training camp. First, we're going to remind you to check out our friends at Freestone Farms. Get their CBD. You can go to freestonefarmscbd.com. Great CBD at great prices. And if you use the code ITB, you get 20% off checkout. That's promo code ITB at checkout on freestonefarmscbd.com. All right, Adam, for the listeners, and we have so many out of state. It's unbelievable. I always marvel about how many people reach out to us from different parts of not only the country, but the globe. But just to give them an idea of where we're at right now, this podcast drops on Thursday. So Wednesday was a walkthrough day. So they've had 5 practices that were open to the media at this point, and 3 walkthrough days, and I believe 1 day off since camp started. So walkthrough days, somebody let the cat out of the bag a little bit. It was Jordan Davis in his press conference where he called something a walkthrough, and he goes, well, it's really not like a walkthrough. It's more like a jog through or a run through. This is not the old Andy Reid 20 minutes of walking through the plays you're going to run before a game, the day before a preseason game. These are, hour and a 15-minute sessions where they're doing more, but because they're not in pads and because it's not considered a real practice, I don't think you're seeing 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s. Because they're not doing that, they don't have to open it to the media. So that's what we've done so far through camp.
Yeah, so they have to have 2 days off per week. So Friday's the next day off. Yeah, so Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys head coach, calls them jog throughs. Some coaches will call them speed walkthroughs, where you're going at a pretty brisk pace. So I've one of the coaches I'm pretty friendly with, who's on the offensive side of the football. I'm going to see this guy on my tour here. He calls them speed walkthroughs. It's not like the Eagles are the only people that do this. A bunch of teams do it. Right. As you said, when we first started covering the league, they were literally, if you didn't have special teams practice in the afternoon, you'd have just a walkthrough literally for 45 minutes to an hour, or maybe a half an hour, literally walking. And then because they don't want, there were some restrictions with the CBA, like in season, you couldn't do, there's certain things you couldn't do for the walkthrough. So it's interesting how things have changed.
Right. The practice I attended Monday was considered a yellow practice. I would say there was moderate intensity. There were 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, not high intent, not as many as probably on Tuesday when the pads came out. That was considered a green day of practice, and so that was more physical, more up tempo. But as Nick Sirianni said, there will not be tackling to the ground at all in his training camp, which I believe is the same as last year. I don't think there was tackling to the ground last year. There will not be a tremendous amount. It'll be physical the nature of the game is physical, but there will not be tackling. You will not be hitting the quarterback, of course. And I imagine, Adam, when they do the joint practices with the Browns and with the Dolphins, they're not going to be. I would assume they're not going to be tackling to the ground on those either, because you're just trying to get as many guys on the field learning as possible.
Yep. Yeah. The Sirianni, since he came in, as it was explained to me, there would not be, and I don't know, it was Ted Rathett came for the Rams, and more on him in a second, or the Rams, which is their practice. I just want to mention something in a minute here, but
sure.
The way it was explained to me is when they came in, this group, this is based on their meetings they had with whoever, Eagles front office. They made a decision that there wouldn't be any hitting in terms of 11-on-11. There might be some tackling drills just to brush up on technique, but there would not be in team. Oh, and here's the thing, and it's just so funny how things have changed. So the Rams, for the first couple, or I don't know, 3 or 4 years with Sean McVay, the practices were pretty short, like an hour and a half. My goodness gracious, 2.5 hours, and they weren't even done.
Yeah, what's up with that? I thought the Eagles were stealing from them, and that's not.
No, that's what I brought it up. Now Stafford in that practice, his elbow issue flared up again, so they shut him down after 15 minutes. But I was like, what in the world? Because it said 12:30 to 3 o'clock. I'm like, well, obviously it's got to be special teams. Well, they had special teams to end it for like 20 minutes.
Right.
My goodness, I was like, I was getting like antsy. I'm like, I'm not used to this. What do I do? Like, do I have to keep watching this? But it was cool to see. They are so well oiled that their practice, kind of like the Eagles, there's no downtime.
Right.
What some teams just stand there. They don't do it. These players don't do anything. Like, why are you wasting your time? These guys should be doing stuff. They are station to station, always working. Even in a 2.5-hour practice, nobody's standing around. There's always something for them to do. I was very impressed with the way the Rams and the Eagles, for that matter, handle practice.
Yeah, so the Eagles did something. I don't know if they did it at the practice you were at, Adam. I want to discuss this with you. The one I went to on Monday, at the end, I thought it's something new. I haven't seen it before, and I thought it was a really good idea. You know that in these practices, if you're going to have fewer 7-on-7 and 11-on-11s than or like 2, 5, 10 years ago, then that hurts the bottom roster guys, especially the quarterbacks, right? Carson Strong, Reid, Sinnett. So at the end of the practice I went to for about 10 minutes, they did 7-on-7s with only Reid, Sinnett, and Carson Strong, and had Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew and some other starters and first and second teamers working on just like timing and rhythm, doing just kind of warm-up stuff. So they're active, but they're really not doing anything high intensity. But it was a good chance to get reps for Reid, Sinnett, and Carson Strong at the end of practice that are almost sort of real-time reps. It's 7-on-7, but it was very fast-paced and competitive. Did they do that while you were there?
I don't remember seeing that, but I had heard they're having these competition. In fact, I think Sirianni talked about it. They're doing this like competition where he talked about it. He was either asked about it in one of his press conferences. I know he was talking about it, about the competition drills. When it's more what you talk about, the bottom of the roster guys.
Yeah.
Who aren't getting enough reps. You know what's funny? When Chip Kelly was here, if you remember, how many practice fields did the Eagles have? 2 or 3? 3? Is it 3?
You're right, because they've changed I want to say they have one long one going sort of like north-south, and then they had the 2 east-west. I think it was 3, if my memory serves me
always right. The quarterbacks would always get reps. There wasn't standing around. They would always be throwing.
Right.
That was the one thing that I liked, is Chip would say this, no one could ever complain they didn't get reps, because you were, and this plays into moving us forward here with only having 5 healthy tight ends. Because you remember, it's for most of practice, they're practicing on 2 fields. The players are. So you might have 2 tight ends here, you might have 3 tight ends there. You lose one more guy, it becomes really tough. So we'll see what they do as we go forward here.
Yeah, a lot of, it's not like Chip Kelly is remembered fondly in this area, but some of the remnants of his regime are not only Jeff Stoutland, which is maybe the most important one, but also a lot of the things that the Eagles do philosophically, as far as training. Now they're doing a lot of stuff from the Rams, but even before that, they Jeffrey Lurie in particular was the ringleader on this, kept a lot of the sports science staff that Chip had brought in. Diet, nutrition, training, strength and exercise, and pace of practice have all kind of been ratcheted up or stayed the same since Chip Kelly left. So there is still kind of an imprint that he had on this franchise that is positive, as much as the other negative stuff we talk about all the time. I always find that interesting. So let's talk about Jalen Hurts, because it's interesting. You and I on different days saw different passing offenses. I remember when we recorded our last podcast, you specifically said there were some opportunities where Jalen Hurts drove the ball downfield. In one regard, in one snap, you remember Quez Watkins did not track the ball well, or else it would have been considered a nice deep throw. And then you mentioned a couple of one. At the practice I went to, I don't think the ball was in the air for more than 15 yards once. And that's not a Jalen Hurts thing. I didn't see it from Gardner Minshew either. And those were really the only two guys getting most of the reps in 7s and 11s. So it was just, I would say, not only that day, but the day you left after your first practice that you saw, the people who were at practice were saying there really was not a downfield presence. Then I went, not a downfield presence. And then when the pads came out on Tuesday, there was more of a downfield presence there. So that kind of speaks to what we've been talking about, the unevenness of the first days of training camp, where it's still touch and feel and that the defense is ahead of the offense. But it was probably good for people to see on Tuesday, and I know you have some intel on it, that the ball got driven down the field a little bit more.
Yeah, a couple things though, just as an aside. So on what you were just saying, at one of the practices I saw out west, majority of throws at one of the practices was within 25 yards. They weren't thrown. One of the team that I saw was not throwing the ball deep. So and remember, some days they're working on goal line, red zone,
right?
Where they'll only, like, well, this was in the first practice. I went to two or three Eagles practices last week, but the first Eagles practice was inside the 20. And the next practice, they went the full field or 3/4 of the field. So it just depends. So I don't worry about whether they're throwing the ball deep or not. It has no relevance to anything for the regular season. What has relevance is something we're going to get into, and I know people are complaining about. And I think I'm not saying there's something to it, but they got to get Devontae Smith the ball. And it's only 5 practices. That we'll get into that. That's a little strange.
Right.
But I don't, it doesn't matter whether they're not, you work on different things each day.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a caveat though. I would say, and I only saw it a couple times. And again, unless you're there every day and counting every rep, which nobody can do, but I would only say I'm not worried. The only concern I would say is if you saw wide open receivers deep down the field, not getting the ball, and the quarterback is either checking down or he's scampering out of the pocket thinking that there's pressure if there's not, and not seeing that. I can't say that I saw an abundance of that, but there were a couple of times in both 7s and 11s where I felt that there was a deep receiver open and the ball went somewhere else. But you'll see that in NFL games too. I mean, that's, again, you're describing the function of an offense.
By the way, on that, now last year it was a problem for Hurts.
Right.
When the part of the accuracy is not just the composite number. It's not pulling the trigger, not seeing it well. The guy gets open and the player didn't throw it. He just didn't process well.
Right.
Now, Derek Carr, though he was great with it last year, their average per pass of 10, all the good metrics that you're looking for were there. But early in Carr's career, he wouldn't cut it loose, and the coaches would crush him for it. Like they would, just talking to the guys that work with him over the years, like, what? Throw the football. You see it.
Right.
Throw it. And you could only show the guy the tape, and if he doesn't throw it. Now, I've not heard that this has been an issue. It's just basically if they called it, for more often than not, unless you saw a couple here and there, you didn't throw it, you're never going to be perfect with it. Sometimes you just don't see it great.
Right.
But in the one other practice I saw last week, they took shots. They were just covered for the most part.
There you go. And that's a good feather in the cap to the defense in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. No, that's something that we'll watch though as we come back. You like you said, you'll be there Thursday. I hope to be there with you. We'll start to get to more practices and see where Devontae Smith is fitting in the offense. Because as I wrote in my observations piece, if you were at Eagles practice the day I was there, and maybe even the day you were there, and you didn't know anything about the Eagles, but you knew about football, you would automatically know by the end of practice that AJ Brown's an important part of the passing offense, but you would have no clue that Devontae Smith was one of their best wide receivers because he just
and a first round pick
and a top 10 pick. So because the ball just it didn't even look like he was getting looked at. But again, too early. Let's see how things go on. That doesn't surprise me.
It's noticeable. Folks who know us, we tend not to overreact to anything. We'll mention something when we think that something's an issue.
Right.
But it is the last practice I was at. They took some shot plays to him. He just Bradbury, the passes there was on time. Bradbury just broke it up. So we'll see. But I did notice on crosser, Smith was getting the ball when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
But talking to other people who've been in practice, he definitely needs to get the ball more. So it's not like we're counting, but I would assume AJ Brown's gotten the majority, not majority, but of all the positions, receiver, running back, and tight end. If you it's probably AJ Brown 1, then Goddard, who's had a very good camp, who looks great,
right?
Who's going to be a big part of it, than Smith. And it's only 5 practices, but it's something we have to note. It's definitely worth noting. And you can't look at we don't know how much they're going to throw compared to last year because they had 2 different offenses, one a passing offense, and they junked it, and they had a running offense.
Right.
We know they want to pass it more than they did after week 6. If you remember, they became the NFL's best running team.
Mm-hmm.
But how they do it, probably Brown will be one. Then the question would be, if Brown's their top pass target, is Smith number 2? Is Goddard number 2? That remains to be seen.
No doubt about it. I don't want to gloss over running backs, but we're talking about receivers now. So I want to continue on that. And I want to note the difference between last year and this year on a certain player, Jalen Reagor. So when I was at practice, Jalen looked good. He looked the same way we've been talking about. He made probably the nicest or the second nicest catch I saw. Deion Kane made a really nice catch too, but actually was a really good throw from Reid Sinnett. I think Minshew hit Reagor on a deep comeback, and you saw good footwork, sold the route, came back, caught the ball right along, like confidently caught the ball right along the right sideline. Would have been a first down in the game. Good job. Now the cornerback obviously respected the speed there to give him the opportunity to come back like that. And in an NFL game, maybe he gets challenged more, but we're just talking about practice for the moment. But Adam, Jalen and I mean, you and I have been reporting since he reported to OTAs that the focus has been there. The body in shape, everything that he wasn't last year because he came to camp in shape or not in shape. And he had to wait a few days before he was even a full participant, has been the opposite. And I would even say, if you remember last year, he made some really amazing plays in practice. And obviously it didn't have a great season, but he felt more like a splash player last year. Whereas this year, from what I'm hearing, he's more consistent. He's winning when he's supposed to win. He's running the routes the way he's supposed to run. He's catching the ball. And it's not just a one-handed snare once every 6 or 7 days. He's actually looking like a more complete player this summer.
Yeah, look, other than the social media thing, what did he say? He said something over John Clark's tweet about.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I saw it, and I'm like, he just has to stay off social media. It's a shame.
Yeah, that is too bad.
Because it's funny because I remember Jalen Reagor talked about, maybe it was either last year's rookie season, about he said something like that, where he was just like, he seemed like he had the right attitude about not worrying about what people are saying, and then you have this.
Right.
So, but the fact of the matter is, on the field, he's definitely had a good camp. I know the issue that he's had is when he's gone up against the ones. It's one thing to work with the first team offense, which he's had some snaps, but it's another when he's gone up against the ones on defense. He hasn't been able to always beat coverage because though he's rocked up, he's very strong physically. Mm-hmm. It's not about that. It's about hand usage and how to beat press and how to beat tight coverage. And that's going to be the challenge for him. It has been really since he's been drafted.
Right. Now, the other big challenge, right, is what we talked about last podcast. He could be the camp superstar, but at the end of the day, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, 1 or 2. Zach Pascal was brought here for a reason. The coaches love him. The coaches love Quez Watkins. So 3 or 4. So what's the best case scenario for Jalen Reagor on this team? And we say, is it fourth receiver, fifth, fifth? He's not a special teams guy. You can't pay a guy the money that you're making and be a first round pick just to go out there and play some special teams. It just doesn't make
Unless punt,
sense.
he'll just he would only return punts.
Right, exactly. That's my point. So I still think that kind of the cards are stacked against him as far as making the 53 because of what they've done this offseason.
We're not going to cut him. We know that.
But they're not going to cut him, right? And I think it's worth mentioning in the last 48 hours alone, Van Jefferson has gone down, Tim Patrick's gone down, James Washington's gone down, Quintus Cephas has gone down. So you're seeing already a couple of I know T. Higgins got hurt. There's a rash of injuries going on around the NFL. And we know that we reported back at the draft. Was it Baltimore around the draft had called just to check in on Jalen Reagor? And I've heard teams have continued to call in and just check in and inquire about Jalen Reagor. Now, whether or not the Eagles, again, feel compelled to move him right now or what the price is, couldn't tell you that. But that's going to happen. I mean, they know the situation at hand. They see what the moves that the Eagles made, and they know Jalen Reagor is sitting there running with the second team. So it'll be interesting to see his fate by the time the camp ends.
Well, it's funny if and I'm sure they do because they have interns or people lower level with teams.
Mm-hmm.
I know teams monitor social media, so if they see a lot of the good plays from Jalen Reagor, they could use that as a little bit of advanced information. I mean, I know they do this. I mean, I've heard this from camp to camp. They have the interns that scout it and they write down what they see and show it to whoever their boss is.
Mm-hmm.
So look, we all see it. We all go to camp. And there's a kid with the Chargers I never heard of, this 83, this Michael Bandy, this slot receiver, who apparently was a rugby player, was making play after play after play. And if anyone who has any of these the beat reporters put the video on Twitter, here's a guy you could claim. You never know.
There you go. All right, we're gonna pause real quick to hear a word from our sponsors, including our friends at Sky Motor Cars. And if you head out there to Sky Motor Cars in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You'll get a great deal. Let's talk about the running back situation really quickly. I don't think much has changed since our last pod. I know people sort of are looking really into the idea that Miles Sanders got second team reps one day and Kenny Gainwell got first, but they addressed it as well in the press conferences. It's Miles Sanders' team. If anything, I think it's more of a testament that they really like Kenny Gainwell and want to get him more work, as he will be the number 2 guy in a 2-man rotation, most likely, than it's some kind of changing of the guard and Kenneth Gainwell is all of a sudden your feature back. That's not how I interpret it, nor have heard to be.
That's the question. It's never been about Sanders being the main back. He's always been the main back. We never question that. The question we've had is, how much can Gainwell cut into that? We know that it's a guy that can catch the football. We saw the strange role for him being a goal line back early in the season, which nobody saw. So I do wonder in year 2, how does it evolve? Because Sanders, by the way, looks good. We noted back in May how he strengthened his lower body. I know you saw that. Yeah,
you were right about that. It's so noticeable when I saw him. Yeah.
Funny thing, like back then, because you couldn't see. I think he's 26, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I say that because these players change numbers. I can't keep up with it.
No, I think he's still 26. Yep.
Okay. So anyway, in May, I didn't see the back of the jersey, but I saw the guy by me. I'm like, who is this running back with the huge thighs?
Right.
And I look at Miles Sanders, like, whoa, where did this come from? And it's noticeable. But he's, for what we've heard, he's very decisive. He's had a very good camp. He knows it's the final year of his rookie deal. It's a huge year for him. He's on a contract year. Joe Banner would always tell me it was always good for the club to have a guy on a contract year if it got that far, because they know the player had something to play for. You like that. You know that they're going to bring their competition level up just a notch.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we will continue to see how the reps go, but Miles is the guy for now, and there's really nothing more to that. Cam Jurgens, I want to go offensive line. I was really impressed. I really paid attention to the one-on-ones especially because Jordan Davis, the offensive line, defensive line, one-on-one, Jordan Davis, it's amazing to see a 300 and whatever pound, 340, 350 pound guy doing one-on-ones. But it stood out to me that Cam Jurgens, for a guy who's only played center, he had some good reps against Jordan Davis, but it's not even just the reps. It's Adam. What I saw was a guy who his pass protection technique was solid. His foot chopping was synonymous with his hand punch. He was able to wall off Jordan at certain times. And, because Jordan ran over a couple of like they got a guy named William Dunkel or something like that. I don't know.
Sills kid.
Yeah, right. There were certain times where a guy, Jordan Davis, goes up against one of these bottom roster guards and he just like completely trucks them. But I was really impressed with Cam Jurgens' ability to have a plan that's where you start. Executing the plan is the second part of it, and that's somewhat more difficult. But for every good offensive lineman, you have to have a plan to begin with. And I think he has that, and he has the technique, so he's got the foundation.
His challenge is the traffic. Sorting the traffic when it comes to him. And also, as one of the players told us, we talked to in the spring, he said it's not going to be about athleticism because he's superior athlete for the position. Definitely. He's got great length. He's bigger than you normally would be.
Yep.
It's trying to get Hurts out of a tough play. Like Kelsey's a master at it. It's changing the play because he doesn't like the look. He changes it, and he helps Hurts out. So he's just not going to be great at early on because he hasn't played. Was it 2 years he played center at Nebraska?
Yeah, just 2 years played center at Nebraska.
So there's just no way you can make up for that kind of experience. But the good thing is he's going to be the backup this year. So then the other question is we don't know this yet. What would they do if Kelsey could play? Would they go to Jurgens or would they go to St. Malo or
right? Or would they think he's ready? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sorting through traffic is a big thing. I mean, if you're going up against, say, the Giants and a Martindale defense, and he's going to cover up all the gaps, and he's going to have people in and out, and as a center, you got to call out the mic first, right? And then you've got to be able to rotate either to your right or help your right guard or left guard and not leave a wide gap for a blitzer to come through. You have so many responsibilities. So if he's behind in that would be unideal to have him out there. But again, coaching, there's a long time between now and then. He might pick it up really well. So, but I was impressed with him, and I was impressed with Jordan Davis. Did he practice much when you were out there?
He got some reps. The way it's explained to me is he does something that you can't teach every practice. You go, there's nobody we've seen do this before. And we have no idea how good he's going to be. And obviously his weight, I have a hard time believing he's 340 based on what I saw and what you saw. You told me what you saw in reality. But whatever his weight is, he's a super freak. How this manifests into a high-end NFL player, we'll have to see.
Right.
But you see the way it is you see what the Eagles front office saw.
Right.
And the coaches saw, who obviously had a voice in it, who watches the pre-draft tape and whoever had that area. And all the grades that they handed in, there's something special about this player. And when they harness all this stuff and get him the way they want him to be with technique and all that, look out, because you can't teach size, and this kid's ability is off the hook. It's just he's got to put it all together.
So I felt fortunate when I was there because there were two sets of 11s, and one was they were working more in the 3-4/5-2 look with Jordan Davis playing the nose, and then he was flanked by Javon Hargrave, and Fletcher has still not been practicing full yet. So I think it was Marlon Tuipulotu who took his spot, like to the left of Jordan Davis, and that's like kind of your three down linemen, and Reddick and Sweat were the overhang players, with TJ Edwards as a linebacker and Kaiser White as a linebacker. So, and then I got to see the athleticism and what that front looks like when Jordan Davis stands there and occupies those two gaps lining up over the center. And I thought he looked agile and spry and good. He made one play in the backfield, like getting the running back before. And then on the second set of 11s, Adam, they were doing nickel and dime, and they actually played Jordan at 3 technique in some of that. So it was Jordan and Hargrave, I believe it was Hargrave, flanked by a Reddick as a stand-up rusher and Josh Sweat, who I think had his hand in the dirt in that look. It was like a normal nickel pass rush, but also some dime, because when I noticed there would only be one linebacker out there, and it would be Kaiser White. which I thought was pretty interesting. But that's cool. I got to see sort of what their plan might be for first and second down and what it might be when they rush the passer, and certainly getting Jordan Davis on the field as a natural 3 technique, which you probably won't see much of in the season, but they gave him some opportunities to get some run there.
You typically your 3 techniques are not as big as he is. He's generally smaller and more athletic, but he's so athletic. Who cares? He can get off.
No, yeah.
And, Marlon Tuipulotu he's coming on. Part of it's because he's in really good shape. He had a severe hamstring injury last summer, and he was never right physically. And he's pushing. He's definitely pushing for that 5th tackle job. So if they keep 5, that's going to be the numbers thing for those of you who like to predict the 53. They have the ability to have 5 D tackles all could play. Tuipulotu being that 5th guy, and then the question is, because they're going to be a multiple front, how many DNs could they keep? Because they're DNs like Josh Sweat and Teron Jackson and Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham. They're going to do some standing up. That's what they were doing last year.
Right.
We know that they really hell bent on being multiple, and then you look at their front. They've got a lot of depth. That's probably the big takeaway. Like at this point, we're giving you what we saw in practice and take away from people we've spoken to. Their depth is pretty remarkable in the front 7. They can do so many things. Now, I know some people say, well, how good is the depth? Well, Milt Williams is a really talented player. Jordan Davis won't start, but he'll get his snaps.
Right.
Graham.
Well, he might. I mean, Jordan sort of might start, as in he might be out there for the first 2 plays of a game if they're in a run.
Sure,
right. Yeah, defense.
Well, it's funny. Starting technically means who's out there for the first play on offense.
Right. That's why I said technically he might be a starter.
Right. Sure. And it's funny because when they go, well, he's our starter. Do you mean who's out there for the first play, or you mean he's going to play the majority of the snaps? You have to differentiate with that. But with Graham's ability to play with his hand down or standing up, Hargrave and Cox are great inside. You've got this rotation on the D line at tackle, at an end, and when they're 34 with 2 overhangs, have Sweat, have Graham, have Barnett, have Teron Jackson, and obviously the Reddick, who's going to be more of a stand-up player, who's really explosive and he's number 7. I always keep forgetting. I don't know when you were there. My last practice, seemingly was not coming off the field when I was there.
He was on the field. Like I said, he was on the field in the 3-4 and the 5-2, and he was also on the field for the nickel and dime. So yeah, he was there a lot.
Well, here's the thing though. They were mostly a nickel team last year. They probably will be this year.
Yeah.
I understand in nickel you're gonna rush when it's 3rd long. You're gonna rush.
Right.
But the thing is, and I know Gannon, these coaches are so like, you just don't know if they're always being honest with you. They want to be presenting a positive outlook. I get that.
Yep.
But to think Hassan Reddick is going to be good in coverage, I don't know. That's the one thing I have to disagree with Gannon. But
yep. You got to hope that was coach speak and not real speak.
Exactly.
You never know.
That's why I brought it up. Yeah.
Yep. No, I think you're absolutely right. All right, listen, we're going to finish this off first. Adam, we've been having a lot of fun with this Versus Game app, Inside the Birds. You can find us at Inside the Birds on the Versus Game app. What it does is you get to test your Eagles knowledge, test your NFL knowledge, your sports knowledge. We ask a question each week. It's a simple yes, no question or either or question. You just have to answer it and be right. You can play the game for money. You can bet up from up to $1 to $100 and win, or you can simply just test your knowledge, play it for free, and see how you do. We'll have a new question up today. So we've done 3 already. So our 4th question will be up today. So go to Versus Game, find Inside the Birds. If you think you're smart, answer the question. What's the worst you can do? Be wrong? You lose $1? If you know the question, you're confident, bet a lot of money, win a lot of money. It's a great time. What they do is they pit you versus somebody else. So even though it's a lot of people can play, you sort of get a little one-on-one feel for it. So I think that there's everything to it to really enjoy. It's the app that everybody's talking about. So make sure you get it. It's one word, Versus Game, just one word when you're downloading the app, and find us at Inside the Birds and answer our question. Let's just talk a little bit more about the back end of the D here. Cornerback, safety. I mean, I think the cornerbacks played well when I was there. Marcus Epps had another interception. It was kind of a tipped pass. But he's out there making plays. Every time we say when Marcus Epps is in the game, you hear his name being called.
Yeah, he is their best coverage safety. In fact, he's their best safety.
Yeah.
And this is another guy on the final year of his rookie deal. The Eagles actually claimed him from the Vikings during his rookie season. So I can't believe he's been around nearly 4 years.
Yep.
So he has done a really good job. Tart is still learning the defense, so he's got to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
The big job is now the fifth corner, which is the fourth outside corner job. They're still working through that. All these guys could play inside or outside pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Josiah Scott's the one guy's more of an inside player than an outside player.
Right.
They're working through that. Who the fifth guy will be, assuming they keep 5. I'm sure they will keep 5.
Imagine so, yeah.
But they have to work through that. Slay and Bradbury. What a pairing. Bradbury. I need a little bit more information on what the hell happened with him with the Giants, because based on what I've seen and what I've heard, it looks like he's back to being that Pro Bowl player.
Yeah.
So I get that he wasn't comfortable in the last scheme, and he was making too much money. They had a real cap problem, so that the Giants they're one of the few teams with a cap problem. They were just not going to bring him back, and they couldn't figure out. He was supposed to go to. The funny thing is he declined the trade to Houston for contract structure, so he bagged it. And then now he's here, and the Eagles got him on a 1-year deal and a prove-it deal. Well, it's a prove-it deal. It's $7 million plus up to $10 million if he hits some of the metrics. But he looks as advertised, man. He looks like he's all the way back.
Yeah. By the way, when you say Marcus Epps is the team's best safety, and I agree with you, I'm not yet sure that Andre Sachere is not better than we think also as a defensive player. We already know he's an excellent special teamer, but he's another guy that when you're watching practice, always kind of making plays, always around the ball. He can run a little bit. So, I mean, is he better than Anthony Harris or Jaquiski Tart right now? Maybe not because he's not experienced, but do I think he might have more athleticism and more juice in the tank than those two guys that can kind of be honed and coaxed out over time? Possibly. I mean, I can't help but notice that he's making plays every time he's out there, whether it was last year on special teams or even when he had to play some defensive snaps, and even this year in practice.
Yeah, I just need to find out, because I saw what you saw, how consistent he is.
Yes.
Because he'll make 3 or 4 plays in a practice, go, wow, that's a really good play. I do wonder if he could be their top backup safety or not, or certainly one of their fourth, be their fourth, Tart being their third, and Sachere being their fourth. We know he'll be on special teams. And then Kevon Wallace, who's more of a box player, who was a guy that Jim Schwartz, I know, wanted. So, and then Jared Maiden is still there, who was with him last year,
right?
From Alabama player. But the competition is better at safety. I'm interested to see, once they feel Tart is comfortable, how much of an impact he could be, because, man, the guy's put together some really good football in his career. We know about the injury history being significant. That's why he's not a Niner.
Right.
He's also 30, but the secondary, they're deeper. The questions are still at outside corner. The depth there, the 2 starters are really good. But McPherson has had his moments.
Yep.
But they have to work through. And Jimmy Moreland's a guy we really haven't talked about. I'm just trying to get more intel on him. Because they really need him to make the team. Because he's gone against them. They know him. He's a guy they wanted. Claimed off waiver from Houston. So he's a guy that we need to learn a little bit more of. And we will. We got 3 preseason games for the rest of training camp.
Definitely. All right. Last thing before I get out of here is, you mentioned it last podcast. Reid Sinnett you mentioned you were impressed by his arm. I was too. He made a really nice throw to Deion Kane on a corner route in practice. It was probably the nicest throw of the game. Just came out quickly, frozen rope, good catch by Kane, who tiptoed the right sideline. And on the flip side, Carson Strong has a ways to go. I mean, I was watching those 7-on-7s at the end of practice I was talking to you about, and you rarely see interceptions in 7-on-7s. He got picked off twice on back-to-back snaps. And it's not because he has a bad arm. We know he has a great arm. I think we talked about the offense, how different it was going to be for him going from Nevada to here. My sense would be that it's swimming in his head a little bit right now, and he might be uncertain. And therefore, when he throws the ball, it's not that razor sharp, confident, great throw. And because the 2 interceptions were bad. I mean, they were bad interceptions. So I have to think he's just going through that rookie swimming, things in your head and stuff like that.
Plus, two things on this to close it out here. Footwork is very big. When you don't have good footwork, it'll take juice off the football.
Yes.
So in Tuesday's practice, I was told that Hurts looked like he'd been in the offense before, like he'd been playing in this for a couple of years. He was so decisive, and his throw, it almost made his arm look stronger than it is. We know, we asked Cosell this on our show. He said he's got enough arm.
Yeah.
And he clearly looked like in the Tuesday practice that from people who were there, he looked like he'd been in the offense for a while, and he threw it really well with conviction.
Yep.
And he wasn't indecisive like he was a little bit last week. So this is progress for Hurts, but it's only one practice. This is why we tend not to worry about what happens in one practice versus another practice. If one's good and one's bad, and say, okay, here he is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a progressive situation here.
Yeah.
You look over 12 to 15 practices, you go, okay, here's a framework of where he's at. As we said before, and it's still true, he's had an up and down camp. He's got to continue to progress and build on, as coaches say, build on those, stack those good practices together.
Mm-hmm.
And the good thing is for him, he's got a lot of talent around him, and the NFL's best offensive line. It's coaching can only take you so far. It's just got to sink in, and good thing for him, it definitely sunk in at Tuesday's practice.
Right, and obviously with Carson, he's got a long way to go learning the offense for everything to sink in. So we'll see how that goes. All right, next podcast will be Monday morning. We'll continue to give you our impressions from camp and what we hear from sources and intel, and we'll see if there are any moves made between now and then as well. We'll of course keep you updated. If we have to do an emergency IDB, we'll do that too. Sure. ITB TV, we'll do that too. And as this thing kind of moves along and we get closer to the first preseason game, that will do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Big thanks to our producer, Tyler Strasser, doing a great job as always. And a big thanks to you for flying with us inside the Birds.